Masechet Baba Batra Daf Lamed Aleph. We're going to see a few cases of disputes regarding chazakah of land. Ze omer shel avotai, v'ze omer shel avotai. Hai aite sada davatehi, v'hai aite sade da'achala shene chazakah. Two litigants. They have the same claim. One says that this land belonged to my ancestors, and the other one also said that I inherited also from my ancestors. Well, one of them must be lying. Now, they do have witnesses, but the witnesses testify to different things. One of them, let's say the first one, has witnesses that it was in fact his ancestors. It did belong to them, and so it makes sense. He inherited it. That's how he got it. Whereas the other one brings witnesses that he was there for 3 years, and so he has a chazakah. He has a chazakah, and he has a ta'ana also. How did he get it? He inherited it from his ancestors, and he was there for 3 years. So which of these two is the stronger claim? Amar Rabba, ma lo leshaker, I ba'e amar le, minach ze banta v'achaltiha, shene chazakah. Rabba sides with the second guy, who has a chazakah, because if he was lying, then he could have said a better lie, a lie that would definitely have been accepted, because he could have said, I bought it from you, and I have a chazakah. And in that case, the first guy's claim, it was my ancestors, and his witnesses, that the witnesses say that it was his ancestors. The second guy could say, that's totally true. Yes, you have witnesses. It was yours. That's definitely true that it belonged to your ancestors and it belonged to you, but I bought it from you and I have a chazakah, and then the court would definitely give it to him. Since he would have been believed, if he said that, if he was lying, he could have said that. So therefore, we should believe him also now when he says, I have a chazakah, and he has testimony for a chazakah, and his claim, his ta'ana, is that he inherited it from his ancestors. That's Rabba's position. Abaye says, this logic, it's amigo logic, right? He could have lied and said that, and we would have believed him, so therefore we'll believe him when we say this. Although this is a general principle that we apply, Abaye says we will not apply the mali lishaker logic if it contradicts witnesses. And his current claim that he inherited it from his ancestors contradicts the other guy's witnesses, because the other guy's witnesses that it belonged to his ancestors. And so Abaye says we do not believe the second guy, and we throw him out and we give it to the first guy. Now, we have a continuation of that story. Hadad amar le, in da batachi uz banta minach, v'hai damri lach da batai, desmich li ala kedahabati. So after the initial claims that we already read, they both say it's my ancestors. One says, I have a testimony that it belonged to his ancestors. The other one has testimony that he has a chazakah. So after they say that, the one that has testimony that he has a chazakah then says, oh, indeed, it does belong to your ancestors. Now he's saying this after the other guy already brought witnesses that it belonged to his ancestors. The first guy brought those witnesses. The second guy says, oh, I agree, it did belong to your ancestors, but I bought it from you, right? So now he's changing his claim, or at least modifying his claim, because at first he said that it belonged to my ancestors, and now he's saying, oh, in fact it didn't, and I bought it from you. Well, then what that means, he was lying in the first place. But he says, no, I wasn't lying. When I said it belonged to my ancestors, I didn't mean it literally. What I meant was that I rely upon ownership of it as if it's my ancestors, because I bought it from you, and now I've been here for 3 years, and I have proof that I've been here for 3 years. That's what I meant to say. So, should we accept his modified claim? This is a machloket. To'en v'chozer v'to'en, or en to'en v'chozer v'to'en. In general, can a litigant make a claim and then change his claim and say something different, a modified version? Or once you make a claim, that's it, that's stuck, and you cannot modify the claim. Ula amar to'en v'chozer v'to'en. Narde amre eno to'en v'chozer v'to'en. Ula says, yes, you can modify your claim, and that he gives this new claim, right? This is actually the Migo argument. They said, well, he could have said this. Now he actually is saying it. and we accept his modification, and therefore we'll give it to the second guy. Whereas the rabbis of Nehara De'ah say, no, once you made your first claim, that's it. You can't change it. You can't change it. Maybe you're only saying it now because this other guy has witnesses. You didn't know he had witnesses. Oh, so now you change your claims. You're changing your story. Oh, yeah, sure, it was yours. Yeah, right. Oh, but I bought it from you. So we cannot accept that. And even Ula, who said, yes, you can modify your claim, you can modify it, but you can't completely contradict your previous claim. If, when he first came to court, he said, it belonged to my ancestors and it did not belong to your ancestors, then he cannot change his claim and say, oh, it didn't belong to my ancestors. It only belonged to your ancestors. He cannot contradict his claim. He can only modify it like he did when he said, oh, when I said it belonged to my ancestors, I mean it literally. I never said it wasn't your ancestors. So it was yours and I bought it from you. You could modify but not contradict. ואתה מעברי וטען, אינו חוזר וטוען, מה טעמה טענתי אגמרה. And furthermore, if he was in Bet Din and he made one claim and he didn't modify the claim, and then he left Bet Din and he came back in and then he gave a modified claim, we do not accept it. Why? Because we assume that he went out and someone told him, oh, you made a mistake. You should have said this. If you would have said this, you would have been believed. Oh, really? Okay, I'll go back into Bet Din. We don't want outside help. This is consistent with what in general in Bet Din, we do not allow lawyers in because we want the litigants to present themselves in front of the judges, and they'll be open and honest, and the judges also will be honest and unbiased and be able to evaluate their testimony. We don't want professional lawyers who are going to come and bring all kinds of tricks of the trade. And so if we let him go out of the court and then come back in with a new claim, then we'll suspect that someone gave him a tip-off of, oh, you should say this. But if he's still in court and it doesn't contradict what he said before, but it's just a modification or interpretation of what he said before, and he's still there, so no one told him to say that. He just now realized, oh, I missed some information, or you misunderstood what I said before. Then, according to Ula, we will accept the modification. Umodeh nehar de'ah. And the rabbis of Nehar De'ah, even though they said in general you cannot modify, but in a case like this, let's say he comes back and says, yes, it did belong to your ancestors, and my ancestors bought it from your ancestors. And in that case, he is believed because he's actually he's just adding to, he's not even modifying what he said before or reinterpreting what he said before. At first he said, it belonged to my ancestors. He didn't say it's not yours. Okay, the other guy comes and says, no, it was mine, and he brings witnesses. So then the second guy can come back and say, it did belong to your ancestors. My ancestors bought it from your ancestors, and I inherited it from them. Right? So that this is different from saying, oh, I changed my mind. Actually, I bought it from you. It did not belong to my ancestors. I just meant it was as reliable to me as if I inherited it. He's not changing his story. He's just adding to it. He's just adding another layer in the history of what happened to the land. In that case, he can add that information, and then he would be believed because it doesn't contradict the other guy's testimony. The other guy only has testimony that witnesses said it belonged to his ancestors. I come and say, I totally agree, it did belong. My ancestors bought it from your ancestors, and then I inherit it, and I have a chazakah. והיחיד ישתאה מילי אברי ולה טען ואתה לבית דינה וטען תחוזר וטוען מה טעמה הבית דיניש דלה מגלה טענתה אלא לבית דינה. And now that also agree that if someone said some claims outside of court, before he was discussing the matter with some people, and he said some claim, and then he came to Bet Din and he said something different, we accept it. Why? Because people generally are not going to reveal their true claim outside of court. That's dangerous. You want to keep your cards to yourself. You don't want to go around saying what your claim is. Then the other side will hear about it, and then they'll prepare a counter to it. So outside of court, right, people will ask him, oh, what's your claim? What are you going to say? and he can make up stories outside of court. That's okay. And then tell the real story in court. And we don't say that he's changing his mind, but rather he's now revealing his true claim that he didn't want to reveal beforehand. Amar Amemar, Ana Nehar De'a Ana, Usbira li de To'en bechozer v'to'en. Amemar says, I'm from Nehar De'a, but I think that you can change your mind, even though we said before that most the rabbis of Nehar De'a, it's true, most of the rabbis of Nehar De'a say you cannot change your claim, but it's not all rabbis of Nehar De'a. I'm from Nehar De'a, and I agree that one can modify his claim, v'hilcheta to'en v'chozer v'to'en, and in fact that is the halacha that one is permitted to modify their claim, and we will accept it. Next case. Ze omer shel avotai, v'ze omer shel avotai. Hai aite sahadeh da'avateh v'achala ha'sheneh chazaka. V'hai aite sahadeh da'achala ha'sheneh chazaka. One says it belonged to my ancestors. The other one says it belonged to my ancestors. One of them brings witnesses that it did belong to their ancestors, and he also has a chazakah. So the first guy, he has witnesses that say everything. That's very strong. The second guy has testimony, has witnesses only that he has a chazakah, but not that it belonged to his ancestors. So it's true he has a chazakah and he has a ta'anah, expression of where it came from, but so is the other guy, and the other guy has witnesses also that his ancestors had it. Amar Rav Nachman, Okeh achila lebehadeh achila, v'okeh ara bechezkat abahata. Rav Nachman says we're going to take the testimony regarding chazakah. They both have testimony regarding chazakah, so we'll pit one against the other, and they'll cancel each other out. And what do we have left? One of the guys has has witnesses that it belonged to his ancestors. We're going to give it to that guy, because if he has witnesses that it was his ancestors, then presumably it's his. And the other guy who only has a claim without witnesses is much weaker. That's what Rav Nachman says. We give it to the first guy. Rava says, but this is contradictory testimony. In general, let's say you have two witnesses that say this guy stole. Two witnesses guy says the guy didn't steal. So we don't trust either of these two witnesses, because obviously one of them is lying. So we cannot fully agree that either one is telling the truth. And here we have two sets of witnesses. Each one says that it belonged to this guy's ancestors or that guy's ancestors. One of the two is clearly lying. We don't know which one, but it could be that it's the first guy's witnesses that are lying. And if they're lying about it being belonging to his ancestors, then they are also lying regarding the chazakah that he was living there for 3 years, and therefore one of them is lying. Is no reason to prefer the first guy's two witnesses over the second guy's two witnesses. Just because the first guy's two witnesses are saying more things doesn't mean that they are more true. So therefore, Rava says, since the testimony directly contradicts each other, we throw out both sets of witnesses as not being reliable, and therefore one has no stronger claim than the other. Amar le nehidi ishtakach ba'achilata ba'avata mi itkachash. However, Rav Nachman counters. Says it's true. Their testimony was contradicted regarding the chazakah, because they both have witnesses that they lived there for 3 years. So regarding that aspect of the first set of witnesses' testimony, it's contradicted, and we're not going to trust that. I agree. However, regarding the other half of their testimony, the first guy who brought witnesses that it belonged to his ancestors, that part of the testimony was not contradicted, and therefore we can throw out half the testimony that was contradicted, but accept the other half of the testimony that it belonged to their ancestors, and therefore give it to the first guy who has witnesses that it belonged to their ancestors. Very interesting machloket. Lema Rava v'Rav Nachman beplukta d'Rav Huna v'Rav Chista kami palge. It seems that this first controversy between Rava and Rav Nachman parallels a similar controversy between Rav Huna and Rav Chista. דאיתמר, שתי חיטי עדים המכחישות זו את זו. אמר רב הונא, זו באה בפני עצמה ומעידה, וזו באה בפני עצמה ומעידה. ורב חיסדא אמר, בהדה סהדה שקרא למה לי. לאמר רב נחמן דאמר כרב הונא, ורבה כרב חיסדא. If we have two sets of witnesses who contradict one another in some case, and now one of the sets of witnesses wants to come and testify in a different case altogether, a new case. Can they? Should we believe them? Rav Huna says that either the first set of witnesses or the other set of witnesses can come on their own and testify about a new case, and we will believe them. What you cannot have is one witness from the first set and one witness from the second set. If they would join together to testify about a new case, that would not be good, because for sure one of the witnesses in this new group is a liar. So that for sure would not be permitted. However, even though in the first case, one of these two sets of witnesses was definitely lying, we don't know which one it is. So we continue assuming that they are kosher witnesses, as long as you look at this one separately, well, maybe these were the right ones. You look at that one separately in a different case, then maybe these were the ones that were right and were not lying. We can't penalize them just because maybe they were the ones that were wrong. And so this is the opinion of Rav Huna. So let's assume that Rav Huna is the same as the opinion of Rav Nachman in our case, because then that way he would also say, even though both sets of witnesses talked about where the chazakah, and they contradict each other. Okay, fine. So we throw them out, but even though they contradict each other and one of them is definitely lying, nevertheless we can believe that first set of witnesses that said it belongs to this guy's forefathers, because even though they're one of them, the witness is lying about that, we will trust the first set of witnesses regarding a different matter, and the second set of witnesses also, if they would testify about some other matter, we would believe them. So Rav Huna is consistent with Rav Nachman. However, Rav Chisda says that why should we deal with these lying witnesses? Once we know we have a group here, we have two witnesses. Two of these witnesses are lying, and once we don't accept their testimony about this matter that they contradict each other about, we are not going to trust either group about a future matter until we can verify who was the liar. Someone around here is a liar, right? If you had two vials, one of them is poison, the other one's not. Well, we don't know which one, so let me drink one of them. No, you wouldn't drink any of them, and therefore we should stay away. And so Rav Chisda is consistent with Rava, because Rava in our case says, since they contradict each other regarding the matter of chazakah, therefore we should not trust them at all, not even regarding the other matter where they don't contradict each other regarding whether it belongs to the first guy's forefathers. So should we make these machlokot parallel? And we answer no, not necessarily. Alibad Rav Chisda kula amala pelige. We can argue that according to Rav Chisda, everyone would agree that we don't deal with witnesses that could be liars, and we throw out the whole thing, and we don't trust the first guy any more than the second guy. If we follow Rav Chisda, then we would not trust either testimony anymore, and we just leave it as status quo. Ki pelige aliba de Rav Huna, Rav Nachman ke Rav Huna, veRava ad kano kama Rav Huna ela le'adut acheret, aval le'ota edut la. And the machloket is within Rav Huna. Now Rav Nachman, that he's consistent with Rav Huna, that's obvious, because just like Rav Huna says here that you can trust them regarding a different matter, and so too you can trust them regarding this other matter of the forefathers, even though they were contradicted regarding the chazakah. So that's for sure consistent. And Rava also can say that Rav Huna would have agreed with me, because Rav Huna only accepts the testimony if it's regarding a new case, a different case altogether that had nothing to do with this first case. So therefore, we can accept their testimony. Their testimony was contradicted in some previous case, but we don't know who was true and who was false, so we trust them in a new case. But if it's regarding the same testimony, here those first witnesses came and said it belonged to the forefathers of this guy, and he has a chazakah. Once you're not trusting part of that testimony, then you're not going to trust the other part of that very same testimony, and even Rav Huna may very well agree with that. Now we have a follow-up, continuation of the story that we just talked about. Hadad aitisa deda batehi. Afterwards, the second guy brought witnesses that it belonged to his forefathers. And so now they both have equal testimony. The first guy already brought witnesses that it belonged to his forefathers and he has a chazakah. And beforehand, the second guy brought witnesses that he only has a chazakah. And now he found witnesses that it belonged to his forefathers also. So now it's equal. What do we do? If we gave it to the first guy before, right now, are we going to change our minds and give it to the second guy? Or leave it with the way it is? Amar Rav Nachman, Anan achtine, Anan masekinan le, leziluta de bedina lachashinan. Rav Nachman says, in light of the new testimony, we have to change the verdict. We're the ones that brought him down because of the initial testimony that this guy had both, testimony for both, and we said, okay, you know what? The other guy, let's say the other guy who happened to be on the land, you leave, and the guy with the first set of witnesses for everything can come down. And just like we did that, now that we have new testimony and that now they're equal, so we should revert back to the way it was before and kick the first guy out and bring the second guy in, just as we would if they had brought all of their testimony at the same time. We would have left him there. And we are not concerned about the contempt of the court, meaning that people will see the court as being fickle. We don't worry about that. The court has to do the right thing. And even though people are like, oh, look, the court moves this guy in, and then he moves them out and they change their mind. Look how the court is a flip-flop court. Now, people might say that they'd be wrong because the court is acting on new evidence. And when there's new evidence, then they have to reevaluate. So the court should do the right thing and not worry about people treating the court lightly. In fact, they should have more respect for the court for the fact that they are honest and recognize that with new evidence comes a different verdict. Mativ Rava, Vitema Rabbi Ze'ira. Shanaim omerim met, ushnaim omerim lo met. Shanaim omerim nitgarsha, ushnaim omerim lo nitgarsha. Hare zo lo tinaseh, vim niset lo teseh. Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yosef omer teseh. Rava and some say Rabbi Zera now challenge Rav Nachman, who said that the Bet Din, based on new information, should change their mind and not worry that they will be seen or then treated lightly. And they prove their case from the following Baraita. If two people say a certain husband has died, and therefore the wife is permitted to remarry, but another two sets of witnesses says, no, he did not die, and she is still married to him. Maybe he was away on a trip and he hasn't come back, but there's conflicting testimony whether he actually died or he's still alive. Or a case where two witnesses say that they were divorced and therefore the woman is permitted to remarry. But the other two witnesses say, no, she never divorced. She's still married to that guy and therefore she cannot marry anybody else. In that case, she should not marry lecha techila. If she comes and asks, should I get married? You say no, because it's contradictory testimony and there's a 50% chance you are still married. Therefore, she may not marry. However, if she goes ahead on her own and she gets married, bidi avad, she does not have to divorce that second husband because maybe, in fact, her first husband did die or maybe they are divorced. That's the opinion of Tanakama. Rabbi Menachem, the son of Rabbi Yosef, says that even if she already got married, even bidi avad, she has to get divorced because there's 50-50 chance. And just like we wouldn't allow her to get married, so too, if she gets married, we force her to get divorced. Amar Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yosef, Ematay ani omer teseh, bizman shebao edim v'achar kach niset, aval niset v'achar kach bao edim, harezo lo teseh. Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yosef says, when do I say that we make her get divorced? Only if witnesses came first, and then she got married. So the witnesses came, they came to Bet Din, the Bet Din said, don't get married. She goes against the Bet Din and she gets married anyway, so then get divorced. But if she got married first, and then when she heard that her husband died. The first set of witnesses came, said your husband died, or that you're divorced. She got married, so that's perfectly fine that she got married. And then the other witnesses came and said, oh, in fact, no, we heard he's not dead, or he did not divorce you. Well, then she can stay married, and she does not have to get divorced. And so we see here that according to Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yosef, even though if we had all the information at the outset, both sets of witnesses, then we would tell her that you can't get married, and if she would marry, at that point we would tell her to get divorced. But now that we at first only had half the information, and we said, okay, fine, get married, and then she got married, and new information came, and in that case, we say, you know what? Even though if we had this information on the outset, we would have made you gotten divorced. But since we didn't have the information when you got married, so now we're not going to change our minds. So you see that according to Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yosef, the Bet Din is reluctant to change their minds because they don't want to be seen as fickle. That at first they said get married, and then so she went and got married based on what they said, and then new witnesses came and said, oh no, her husband was not dead, and now we're going to say, oh, get divorced. First you told me to get married, now you can tell me to get divorced. Now the Bet Din here has every right to say, well, there's new information, but Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yosef does not say that. The Bet Din says there's new information, and now, right, had we known that, we would have made you get divorced, so now we also make you get divorced. No, we say, since we didn't know at the outset, and we said you can get married based on the witnesses that said that your husband is dead, then therefore we're not going to change it based on the second set of witnesses. So it seems that Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yosef thinks that we do worry about the Bet Din being seen as fickle, and this is a challenge against Rav Nachman that said that we don't worry about the Bet Din being fickle. And if you would have said so originally, then you should say so now when the Bet Din gets the new information. Amale ana sebari le'ebad obada. Tehashta de'otbinan at ve'otban Rab Hamnuna beSuria la'abdinan ba obada. And so Rav Nachman responds, seeming to accept this challenge against Rava, and he says, I was thinking of making an action. So back in our case, Rav Nachman was the one who originally said, we believe the first guy who has a set of witnesses that there's chazakah and it belonged to his forefathers, and the second guy happened to be on the land, and so at that time he he removed the second guy and allowed the first guy to come onto the land, and then when the second guy had new information, a set of witnesses that it belonged to his forefathers, Rav Nachman says, I was thinking of switching it back and removing the first guy and giving it back to the second guy who was there at the beginning of the court, and I didn't care about how people will perceive the Bet Din. However, now that you and Rav Hamnuna also in Syria, he also objected to my ruling, so I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to leave it as status quo. So Rav Nachman seems to have reneged on his position. However, then we find Nefak Avad Obada. Then Rav Nachman went out and he actually did take an action, and he took that the second guy who was already on it, and now he had put the first guy on, and now he went and took the first guy off and put the second guy back on. Now people who saw it thought that Rav Nachman had made a mistake because he just said that he will leave the status quo since he was refuted by this Baraita and by Rav Hamnuna. We don't have Rav Hamnuna's objection. Maybe it was the same objection. And so he says he's not going to do anything. And then he goes ahead and does something. Rather, after he was challenged and said, you know what, I'm not going to take any action, then he investigated further and found that there are great authorities that back up his original position, that you should take action. Don't worry about the Bet Din seeming fickle. Whatever, if there's new information that changes what they would have said, then they should take action and reverse their previous decision and put the other guy back. And since he found great authority authorities on which to rely. So he relied on them, and rejected the challenge that Rava or the Bizera and Rav Hamnuna brought to them. The opinion of these great authorities is going to come up in the next Mishnah, but that will take us into the next daf. So tomorrow we will see what the proof is of those great rabbis that said that the Bet Din should reverse their decision. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen v'Amen.